All right. Okay, perfect. So welcome to Is Requiring Your Child to Practice the Best Way to Teach Them How to Read? I'm so excited to be able to talk about this topic tonight because it's one that I'm really passionate about. I really believe that kids can, through the process of learning to read, that they can become confident, fluent readers who also love books. And so we're going to be talking about some strategies to help you be able to do that today. We're going to be talking about ways to combat the frustration and to deal with some of the most common problems and frustrations that kids have that cause them to dislike reading. And we're also going to be talking about it from the positive, how to motivate and encourage them to really enjoy reading and to love books through the process of learning to read. So tonight we're going to be talking about the piece that most parents miss that sets kids up for failure before they even start learning to read. And I love sharing this with parents because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And this is something that's really powerful for kids and really helpful for us as we're teaching them how to read at home. We're also going to be talking about how to be ready with specific strategies for teaching the two most important skills that help kids become fluent readers. One of the best ways that we can help our kids to be more confident is to give them the skills that they need to be able to read those books that they love on their own. And so we're going to be talking about the process of how a child learns to read. We're going to be talking about what skills they need, and we're going to be talking about how to develop those for your kids in your homeschool. We're also going to be talking about how you can unlock your child's secret motivation. I love this because this is what makes our kids actually want to learn to read. And this is something that works for all kids, even if you've got one of those kids that just wants to play on their tablet and they want nothing to do with reading. We're going to talk about how you can use that and leverage the motivations that your child already has to help them become a fluent reader. And then we're also going to talk about how you can fit all of this reading practice into your busy schedule, even during a time like now, like the holidays that are starting to come up where there's all sorts of irregular things going on and our schedules are so unpredictable. We're going to talk about how we can make sure that we're consistent with teaching our kids how to read. So I want to jump right in and start with some of the most common problems that I see with the families that I work with, because a lot of times these are the things that are causing us and our kids to get really frustrated and to dislike the process of learning to read. So I want to run through these right now because I think these are really helpful to think about. And if you could let me know in the chat as I'm going, let me know if you can relate to any of these or if these are things that your child is struggling with right now. That'll help me know what to really focus on during our time together tonight so that you get the most benefit out of this. So the first thing that I see a lot is kids who are guessing words instead of sounding them out. Again, let me know if you can relate to this at all in the chat. So these are kids that when they see a word that they don't know, instead of going through the steps and the process of trying to figure out what that word is, they might look at the first letter and guess, or try to read a few of the sounds and guess, or maybe they'll look at the picture and guess, but either way, they're not sounding out the word. Or maybe your child can read a word one day, but then they forget them the next day. So this is the Dory the fish syndrome, right? You teach your child to read one day and they've got it and you're so excited and they're so excited. And then you come back the next day and it's just a blank stare and they've forgotten everything from the day before. Or maybe you've been trying for several months and you're stuck at the process of reading letters and you still haven't moved on to reading words. That's a super common place that a lot of kids get stuck. They maybe know some of the letter sounds, maybe those are even a struggle, but the process of getting those letter sounds to turn into a word is just a challenge for a lot of kids. Another thing that's super common is when our practice time starts to end with fights or tears on a regular basis. So these are kids that get frustrated and discouraged, and the longer that lesson lasts, the more frustrated and discouraged they get until you end up just having to give up because they're so upset. Or maybe you have a child that's really distracted and really struggles to focus when you're teaching them how to read. They have a hard time just paying attention and even getting through that lesson. Or maybe your child is giving up before they even try. They just say it's too hard or they can't do it. And that kind of attitude is getting in the way of them even being able to start learning to read. So let me know which one in the chat. Yeah, my child does all of them. Yeah, these are super common for a lot of kids. But yeah, let me know which ones in the chat so that we know which ones to focus on for sure. A lot of these problems are caused by some pretty common mistakes that we can make as parents or some that our kids are making. And if we have one or more of these problems happening, it's really important to be aware of these mistakes and to start to notice them as well. So one of them is practicing reading for 20 minutes or more at a time. It's really important when we're teaching our kids to read that we're making sure that our lessons are short enough that they match with our kids' attention span. And so a lot of times, especially when our kids are getting discouraged and frustrated and the lessons are ending with fights or tears, it can be because we're just trying to push the issue and make the lesson too long. And then another mistake that I see often is that maybe we start to avoid the process of teaching our kids to read, or we're less consistent than we maybe should be, just because some days it's easier just to skip the fight and to avoid the process altogether. Another really common problem is never reading real books or reading the wrong books. We can definitely talk about this if you would like to as well. And this is the problem of just helping our kids be able to find the motivation to read by seeing their ability to read real books. One of the most common mistakes that I see that we're going to talk about tonight is having the wrong focus when you're teaching reading. So either you're spending a lot of your time focusing on learning words or you're focusing on sight words, and both of those things can cause a lot of those problems that we talked about. And so we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about what to focus on instead. And then also assuming that your child isn't ready. Sometimes that can be the case, but for a lot of kids and a lot of families that I work with, it's actually not. And so a lot of kids are a lot more capable than we think they are. So if you could relate to any of those problems, or if you kind of found yourself relating to some of these mistakes, tonight's class is going to be super helpful for you because we're going to be going deep into these things and talking about how to change the script for your child and really help them be motivated to be a confident reader and a book lover through the process of learning to read. And if you can relate to those mistakes, I just want to say that I can as well. I taught both of my kids to read at home. This is my oldest, my son, who is now 8, and I'm currently teaching my daughter, who's 5, and we are getting close to the end of learning to read, which is pretty exciting. She's a pretty confident reader now as well. But when my son first started reading, he really struggled, and a lot of those the common problems that we had almost all of those. We had daily tears and struggles and fights over reading. And through the process of learning to read, I was watching that love of books that he had before he started reading slowly fade away day after day, as we had a negative experience every single day with reading. And I knew something had to change. And that was when I discovered the methods that I share with parents inside of the Reading Better Together Club and the Reading Better Together curriculum. And that was when it really started to change for my son as well. He now really loves to stay up late and read under the covers with a flashlight. That's actually what he's doing right now. He's getting some sanctioned reading time. So he is so stoked that we have a class tonight. And I just wanted to share this because this is one of my favorite writing assignments that he has ever done. It was from a couple of years ago, shortly after we had started to implement some of the changes that I'm going to be talking about tonight. And he wrote in this reading assignment, he was supposed to draw a sad face. That's the tears right there. And he was supposed to write something that makes him sad. And he said, "Not reading makes me sad." And as a mom, I just was so excited to see this because it really showed me that the methods that I was trying and the changes that I had made were really starting to work with him, and that love of reading was coming back. Sherry says, "Child knows more than he will share with anyone." Yeah, that's really common too, for sure. Okay, so tonight we're going to be talking about strategies that you can use when you're teaching your child to read that is going to help you not only have more success with the process so that your child can feel more confident and less frustrated, but also help your child be more motivated to read as well. And these steps are going to form kind of the staircase that will help us get out of the cycle of frustration and discouragement and onto the positive feedback loop of motivation and success. And they're going to spell the word stare so that we can keep track of where we are. So the S in stare is for start with you. The T is for together. The A is for ability. The I is for interests. And the R is for routine. And we're going to be talking about each of these. The slide is going to come back a bunch of times. So if you don't have all this right now, don't worry. I just wanted to show you where we're going so that you know, and then it will continue to come back up as we get there. So I want to start with us first, because I think this is something that's really important as a homeschool parent or as a parent who's teaching your child to read at home. And I think it's something that we take for granted and really don't spend a lot of time thinking about. And this is that idea that teaching your child to read starts with you. I really believe, and the more that I homeschool my kids and the older that they get, the more I appreciate and realize how important it is to spend time myself, focusing on myself and trying to become the best possible teacher that I can for my kids so that I can set them up for success in our homeschool and in their learning. And so it's really important to remember that when we're teaching our kids, that process starts with us first. One way that this comes out is that our thoughts really matter when we're teaching our kids. What we're thinking about our abilities as a teacher, about our kids' abilities as a student, and about that process of them learning has a huge impact on how they learn, on our confidence, and also by extension on our kids' confidence. These things impact our teaching, they impact our kids' learning. And so it's important for us to be aware of the thoughts that we have and to be intentional about choosing to change our thoughts if we need to be able to have that confidence to teach our kids. I wanted to share a research study about this. If you have been around here for a while, you know that I love learning about the scientific research and understanding how we can learn from it as homeschool parents and do the best job that we can for our kids. I love studying this kind of stuff. And so I wanted to share just one study with you tonight. And this is an older one. It was done in 1968 by Rosenthal and Jacobson. And it was published in this book that they wrote called Pygmalion in the Classroom. And what they did was they had this classroom of students who were in San Francisco and in an elementary school. And they wanted to figure out what would happen if the teachers in this class of students who were in a school, if the teachers really believed in their kids. So they came in and they told the teachers that they were going to give the kids a test, and they gave them an IQ test, but they called the IQ test something different. They called it the Harvard Test of Inflected Acquisition. And they told the teachers that this was a test that was going to predict who was going to do really well in their class that year and who was going to just learn a ton and grow a lot and be super successful. So all the kids take this IQ test, and then the researchers chose some kids just completely randomly, not based on their test results or their IQ score. And they told the teachers that those kids were going to have a really great year. They were going to learn a lot. They were just going to take off. It was going to be great. And then they followed those kids for the next 2 years. And what they learned was that the kids that they had told the teachers were going to be special and their IQ was going to increase and they were going to do a great job, those kids actually did. They found that the teachers in those classrooms probably subconsciously were giving more attention to those kids, the ones that they thought were special. They were expecting more from those kids. They were giving them more positive feedback and more approval. And the result was that those kids actually did have an increase in their IQ. It's a really interesting experiment, and I think one that's really relevant for us as parents because it shows us the power of our thoughts about our kids, about ourselves as teachers, and about the process of learning. So when we can make sure that we're feeling equipped and confident in this process of teaching our kids, then we're going to project that confidence onto them as well. We're going to help them feel more confident about what they're learning, and it's going to actually improve their results. So taking some time to invest in yourself as a teacher is so important, and it will help you to be able to get better results for your child as well. The more that you can understand about the process of teaching your child to read, and the better that you are at that process, the easier it's going to be for your child, the less frustrated they're going to be, the more confident they're going to feel. So when you can make that investment in yourself, like what you are all doing tonight by being here and by taking the time to learn about this, when you can make that investment, that's so important for our kids in helping them to be successful. This reminds me also of a situation that's been happening in my family for a while. So my husband and I both do some of the cooking in our family. I used to do a lot more of it. Lately, my husband has been doing quite a bit of it. He really enjoys to cook. But I've noticed that there's a difference between what happens in the kitchen when he's cooking and what happens in the kitchen when I'm cooking. And you can let me know in the chat if you can relate to this. I bet there are some people who can. So when my husband goes to the kitchen to cook, it is an event. He needs to go to the grocery store and get ingredients. Sometimes we go to multiple grocery stores if he can't find the exact ingredient that he wants, or we might go to a specialty grocery store. There's usually multiple hours involved in the process as he goes through each of the steps that a chef would in creating the meal. Usually the kids are not invited to participate, although sometimes now that they're older, they are, but especially when they were younger, they were not invited to participate in this process. And at the end, he came out with this amazing dish. He could serve these dishes in a restaurant. I would pay great money to eat them. I am so blessed and lucky to have him cook for me because they're fantastic. When I go to cook dinner for my family, it's a different story. It's usually a weeknight. Usually, ideally, dinner would have been on the table 20 minutes ago. So there's usually at least one hungry kid, but sometimes more, in the kitchen asking about every 10 seconds, is it dinner time or not? And usually there's not a plan. So often I'll open the cupboard and pull out like half a box of macaroni and a cucumber, and then have to figure out how to turn that into a meal. Needless to say, his dinners turn out a lot better than mine. You can let me know in the chat if anybody else can relate to being the emergency last minute chef in your house. But all that to say, what we put into the dinner has a big impact on the results, right? We know that my husband's dinner, where he gets the special ingredients and takes all of the time and the care, is going to turn out better than my dinner, where I open the cupboard and throw some stuff together in 5 minutes flat, right? So the more that we have, the more that we can give. And this is so true when we're teaching our kids to read as well. We can't give what we don't have. And so it's really important to invest in making sure that we have the skills and the ability and the knowledge to be able to share with our kids. I know that as a homeschool parent and as a parent in general, I know that for me, I'm the last one that I ever want to invest in. I'm always willing to give up things if it means that my kids will have more. But in this case, I know that taking the time to learn these skills for myself is an investment in my kids and is a way to make sure that they have the most. Candy says, yeah, that's so me. Last option cook. Husband rocks it. Oh my gosh. Yep. I can totally relate. Yep. And then the funny thing is, Candy is, he's like, I'm such a good cook. I'm a much better cook than you. Yep. In those circumstances, that's true. I love that. So an investment in you is an investment in your child. And the more that you can take the time to really learn and understand the process of learning to read, the easier it's going to be for your child. So that's the S, which stands for start with you. And it's really important just to take the time to invest in this process. And I'm so excited that you're here doing that tonight. So now we're going to jump ahead and we're going to talk about the T and the A together and kind of in the opposite order, because we're going to jump into how our kids actually learn how to read, because one of the best ways to motivate them is to give them some success. And so I want to break down the process of learning to read just a little bit and talk about some of the component parts so that you can see where your child is strong and where they might be struggling. And in order to do that, I want to show you this really popular picture. If you spend any time at all learning about the process of learning to read, you're probably going to be exposed to this. This is Scarboroughs reading rope. And it's a little bit of an older picture. This was an infographic before infographics were popular, but it's really helpful in understanding the reading process. Basically, there's a whole lot of stuff over here, and all of these things are combined together and woven together in order to create a skilled reader. And without going into a whole lot of detail on all of those pieces, it's just important to notice that all of them are combined together just like a rope is woven together. And so if our kids are missing one of those big components, then it's going to cause problems for them and create kind of a weak rope that won't actually work. Here's another way to look at this, and a way that I think is really helpful is with this multiplication problem. And the multiplication problem goes like this: decoding times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. And these pieces, decoding and language comprehension, these ones go with the two big sections that we're spiraling together to make the rope on the last slide. I don't know if I can go back. I don't think I can. But decoding and language comprehension were those two big pieces, and they combine together to make reading comprehension. So decoding is your child's ability to actually sound out the words on the page. So phonics would be decoding, and all of those pieces and parts that go into that. And then language comprehension is your child's understanding of the word. So once they sound out the word, do they know what that word is? Is that word a part of their vocabulary? And is that story something that they have some life experience with, to where they'll be able to understand what they're reading? And kids need both of those parts together to bring them to reading comprehension, to being able to really read and understand the story. And we have to go back to elementary school math for just a minute, because with this multiplication problem, it's really important to note that kids need both pieces. So back in elementary school, we learned that whenever we multiply something by 0, the answer is 0. And in this multiplication problem, the same thing is true. So if either decoding or language comprehension is a 0, if your child is missing either one of those skills, they will not be able to become a fluent reader and have that reading comprehension that we need for them. So they need to be able to sound out the words, and they also need to be able to have the vocabulary and the understanding to understand what they're reading. And when they put both of those pieces together in this multiplication problem, then you get a fluent reader. So there's two parts to this. The first part was the decoding, and this is the ability that kids have to learn to be able to read. And so the biggest challenge that I see when parents are trying to teach our kids to decode, to read words, to sound out words, is this issue of sight words. And the sight words come up because they're so popular. There are all of those resources for teaching sight words. There's those sight word lists. Let me know if you have seen those or seen the resources for them. They're all over the place. And especially for homeschool families, there are so many resources for learning to read that are based on sight words and based on those sight word lists. And so we get tripped up as parents because we think that those are going to be helpful in teaching our kids to read, because that's what people tell us about them, right? People tell us, oh, teach your kids these words, memorize this list, make some flashcards, and boom, you'll have a reader. Yeah, CE says yes, everywhere. Yeah, right? They're everywhere. And the other thing that's tricky about it is that that actually works for a little bit at first. At first, you'll see some early success with the flashcards and the word lists. But the problem is that we're not actually teaching our kids how to read when we do that, because the way that our kids store a word that they learn in a flashcard is different from the way that our kids actually store a word that they're reading. And they use a different part of their brain to be able to do that. So when our kids are reading a word, or when we as adults, as fluent readers, are reading a word, our brain actually takes that word, and in just a split second, it sounds it out into each of its individual sounds, and then maps those together and makes a word. And it happens so fast that we don't even notice it, but it is happening. And so that's why when you're reading, you can read like somebody's really messy handwriting, or like those fonts where it's every other letter is a capital. You can read those things because you haven't memorized that word by its shape. You've memorized it by its sounds. And when every other letter is a capital or it's in somebody's messy handwriting, the sounds don't change, just the shape does. And so when we ask our kids to look at a flashcard and memorize a sight word by its shape, we're using a whole different process in their brain. And unfortunately, this is a process that takes a lot longer. The research says that it can take between 5 and 500 repetitions for a child to memorize a word by its shape. So if you've got one of those kids from the beginning that knows the word one day, they're good, they got it, and then you go back the next day and they're clueless, that might be because they've memorized it by the shape and they're not quite to that 500 repetitions yet to be able to have that in their long-term memory. So we need a better strategy for our kids that doesn't involve memorizing thousands of words off a list times hundreds of repetitions per word. And we need a strategy that's going to help them be able to attack new words that they see. And that's the other problem with these sight words, is that when we teach a sight word to our child, we've only taught them one word. It's like that really popular analogy or story about teaching a man to fish. You've probably heard it. The story goes that if you give a man a fish, he'll have a fish for a day. But if you teach him to fish, he'll be able to fish for a lifetime, right? You probably heard that. Well, if you teach your child a sight word, that's kind of like giving them a fish. You've taught them that one word, but they're not going to be able to take the skills that they learned from that one word and apply it to anything else. And the same is true with teaching our kids how to read and how to sound out the words and giving them strategies to attack those new words. That's when we're teaching them how to fish. We're giving them the strategies to be able to find a new word on their own. This is also why kids guess so often, because if we aren't equipping them with the strategies to understand how to be able to read a word, then they don't have anything to do when they come to a word that they don't remember, or a word that they haven't seen enough times, or a new word that they don't know. And this is why that sight word strategy that works so well at the beginning starts to fall apart, because once our kids get to the point where they're learning new words and where we're expecting them to read new words, without teaching it to them first, we need to make sure that we're equipping them with the strategies to be able to do that. It's so important. But when we do that, this is so rewarding. This is the stage that my daughter is at right now. And she has reached the point where she's able to take what I've taught her and apply it to new words that I haven't taught her yet. It's called the reading explosion. And that's an actual term that reading teachers will use for it. And it happens somewhere about the second or third grade reading level-ish area. And kids will start to be able to take the things that you've taught them about the words that they know and apply it to words that they don't know. And all of a sudden their reading vocabulary just takes off. It's amazing. So cool to see. And that's the point where reading really starts to click for your child. And it does that because you have to intentionally teach them how to read a word that they don't know. And we don't get there from sight words. So what we do need to do is start with letter names and sounds first. Those are the building blocks for reading. And it's really important that we start with them. And then we need to teach our kids skills and strategies to be able to combine those to make words. We're going to go through this really sequentially, starting with the easiest, shortest, smallest words first, and then gradually adding new skills and working up to more difficult words over time as our kids start to master it. And that's the process that will help our kids to be able to learn to read and to attack those new words in a way that gives them confidence and isn't frustrating. But that rope had two parts. Remember, there was the decoding part, and then there was another part that was woven together with it to help make a child that could understand what they read. And that other part is language comprehension. And this part is one that your child can get from you reading out loud to them. So reading out loud to your child is not enough to teach them how to read for most kids just on its own, but reading out loud to your child is still really important in raising a reader. And here is why, because you're giving them this language comprehension piece. It's important to do at any age as well. So Even if your child is already reading on their own, you want to continue to read out loud to them because you can still help them with this language comprehension piece, even when they're older. As you're reading out loud to your child, you're going to be exposing them to new vocabulary. You're going to be showing them words that they wouldn't be able to read on their own and helping them to understand those. And you're also going to be exposing them to situations and experiences that they probably wouldn't see in the books that they can read independently. And that is awesome because it's going to help them to build that understanding and that comprehension so that when they do come to those in books that they can read on their own, they will know what's going on and they'll understand it. So those two combined together to make a fluent reader. The T was for together, and that was reading books out loud to your child and focusing on the vocabulary and the meaning and all of those pieces to help them understand what they're reading. And then the A was for ability, and that is starting with those sounds and blending them together to make words and teaching our kids to read using that sequential process rather than relying on the sight words. So those are really the keys to helping our kids to be able to read independently and to develop that confidence that's going to motivate them to want to practice. But I want to talk about two other really key pieces of motivation because I think this is where we really throw the gasoline on the fire and take this motivation to the next level. So we're going to talk about our kids' interests, and then we're going to talk about our routine and how both of those things really impact the motivation that our kids have to want to practice reading and to want to be able to read those books on their own. So interests, I think, are really, really key and probably one of the most important things that we're going to talk about tonight because our kids have unique interests and we can use those interests as the secret key, the secret motivation to get our kids to want to practice reading. So this was something that I learned before my kids were born. I had an opportunity to be a teacher, and I spent a little over a decade in the classrooms working with kids of all different ages and in a variety of different schools over that time. And one of the places that I worked was a Montessori school, and it was fascinating to learn about the Montessori method and just the different things that they did when they were teaching kids. If you aren't familiar, Montessori is sort of an open-ended method. They put out a whole bunch of materials and supplies on shelves and basically give kids free rein to go and explore and learn about what they're interested in. So in our classroom, we had 25 kids ranging in age from first grade all the way up through fifth grade, and every single one of them was learning about something different at this time. So it was sort of like trying to homeschool 25 kids all at once. It was a little crazy most of the time, but it was also a lot of fun. And we really relied on this motivation piece because with 25 kids and one adult, there was no way that I could sit there next to the kids and require them to get work done. We had to operate off of their motivation and not just my requiring them to get stuff done. They would never get anything done that way. And so this motivation piece was really important. But Montessori also was focused on this idea of sensitive periods and really taking advantage of our kids' interests and using them to help motivate them. So here's how sensitive periods work. And it's something that applies not only to kids, but also to adults. Basically, it says that we're interested in different things at different points in our lives. And during the time that we're really interested in the thing, we are more likely to want to learn about it. And we're going to remember the things better. And we're going to learn better about that topic during the time of that sensitive period. It's kind of cool. So this is, you might already know your child's sensitive periods or the things that they're most particularly interested in right now. This is the topic that your child could talk about for an hour without repeating themselves, and they just have so much to tell you, and they're so into it, and they're so interested, and they've read all the books, and they've done all the things, and they can't be quiet about this thing. And you may or may not have one. You probably have one right now as well. So let me know in the chat if you know what your child's thing is right now. Let me know in the chat what your child's is, or maybe even what yours is. I'm curious. Because we have them as adults too. So I put cars on this slide to remind me because recently I had a sensitive period for cars. So normally I not particularly interested in cars. I mean, I use the car to get me and my kids from, point A to point B to all the activities, check. And that's like where the interest in cars ends, right? But about a year ago, the car that I was regularly using to drive the kids to the activities started making this really awesome rattling noise. It kind of sounded like the whole car was going to fall apart into a pile of bolts on the side of the road. And we realized pretty quickly that we were going to need to get a new car. And so all of a sudden, I went from not caring at all about cars to wanting to know all the things. I started watching YouTube videos of people driving cars in mountains to try to understand how different cars handled, because at the time we really weren't able to test drive cars because of the way the market was and the availability of cars. So I was watching people test drive cars. I was going online and going to like Kelley Blue Book and all those sites, and I was comparing cars. I had this giant chart that I had written where I was writing down gas mileage of different cars and estimated repair costs of different cars and the number of square feet in the back seat of different cars. And there was a period of time last fall when if you had asked me the square footage in the back seat of the 6 most popular SUVs on the market, I could have told you. Can I tell you now? No. Have I watched one YouTube video since we got the car? No. So that sensitive period is definitely over. But during that time, I was very motivated to learn about cars. Nobody was paying me to learn about cars. Nobody was bribing me. Nobody was going to ground me if I didn't learn about cars. I just needed to know that information, and I was motivated. Yeah. Sherry says, cars. Yeah. So your child is doing cars. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. My son, was into trucks for the longest time. He still kind of is. At 8, he really has not fully gone out of the truck phase the way that a lot of kids do when they get older. He's still pretty interested in trucks. But he's sort of starting to delve off into like engineering and building things, especially electronic things, which has been really fun to watch. My daughter, we just got back from Disney World about 6 weeks ago. And so she is big into the Disney princesses, and she can tell you all the princesses and all of their associated little things. And she's got all the little princess dolls in her room that she's playing with. So she is deep into the Disney princesses. And chances are your child probably has one. You may or may not have something going on right now as well, as far as a sensitive period. And so this is really valuable information because we can use these things to really help our kids in this process of learning to read. And the trick is to be able to find some way to tie that interest that they have into their reading lessons. So for my daughter, we've been doing her reading lesson. And then at the end, we found a whole bunch of beginning reading books about Disney princesses. And so we've been going through those at the end of her reading lesson. So she does a few minutes of practicing the skills that we want her to learn and working on blending. And then at the end, we read one of these Disney princess books together. And it's a great way to end the reading lesson and to just give her a win and to add some motivation there. We've been using some of these things as rewards for my son as well. One of the things, he's a reader now, so we're not doing a whole lot of reading practice, but I am doing a lot of handwriting practice with him. He is just starting to learn cursive. And so whenever I do his handwriting, I'm always having him practice handwriting with whatever it is that he's interested in. So we're not just writing, D, 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 we're writing dump truck, excavator, road steamroller, all these things on his handwriting to try to encourage him to learn because of that interest that he has. So the challenge is to try to figure out how to take that interest and incorporate it into those reading lessons in some way. So with the cars, so you can let me know, type an interest in the chat and we can brainstorm some ideas about this. Sherry, with the cars, one of the ones that I really love to do is we take a Hot Wheel track, one of those orange Hot Wheel tracks, and we'll write a word on the Hot Wheel track with little pieces of masking tape or little sticky notes, or sometimes we'll just put the letters, if I'm lazy, we'll put the letters like below the track. So the track will have, let's see, I don't have one, but the track will have like, C-A-T, and then we'll take the car and we'll drive it along the track. At as the car is driving along the track. And whenever the car gets to a letter, then they have to say the letter. And then when we get to the end, then hopefully they'll know the word, and then maybe we'll drive the car faster and we'll blend it faster. Those kind of things can be really fun for kids who like cars. So if you got another sensitive period, go ahead and throw those in the chat and we can talk about those too. Okay, so interests, super important when we're teaching our kids to read, because that's going to be the motivation for them to want to practice as well. And then I also want to talk about routine, because routine is one that can go either way. It can be a great motivation for our kids to want to practice, and it can also be discouraging and make it harder for our kids to practice, especially those easily distracted ones like we were talking about at the beginning. And so our routine is a way that we can set our kids up for success, or in some cases failure, based on how we structure this routine. So the first thing that you want to do is choose a really consistent time of day to practice reading, and you want to be as consistent as possible to practice it every day. So for us, the time that has always worked the best for my kids, for whatever reason, is to do it right after breakfast. So we finish our breakfast, we clear the table, and then whatever it is that our kids are working on that's the most important or the most challenging happens right away then. And I think it might be because I still have their focus. They have not drifted off to go and find whatever toy that might be distracting them or whatever activity they had planned for their day. And that just is a really good time when they're well rested and they're well fed and they're ready to focus. Those things are really important, by the way. You want to make sure that whatever time that you pick is a time when your child has ideally just eaten and is also really well rested. So last thing before bed is probably not going to be your time here. You also want to find a time that has an anchor. And this comes from the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, which is a fantastic read. And what he says to do is when you're trying to add a new habit into your life, you want to anchor it to another thing that's always habitual. This is another reason why breakfast works really well for us, because my kids eat breakfast 365 days a year. If it is snowing out, we eat breakfast. If it's summer, we eat breakfast. If it's a weekend, we eat breakfast. If it's Christmas Day, we eat breakfast. It doesn't matter. Breakfast always happens. And it doesn't matter how busy we are or what else is happening in our life or who's sick or who stayed up late the night before. Breakfast always happens. And so that means that cue that it's almost time for reading happens every day. So the only thing that I have to do in order to get reading to happen is to say, okay, right after breakfast is reading. So we're going to use breakfast as our cue. And then right after that, that's reading time. And it might be that breakfast is at 8 a.m. and reading is at 8:30. It might be that breakfast is 10 a.m. and reading doesn't start till 11. I'm not so worried about the actual time of day. I'm more concerned about lining up that new habit right after the anchor habit in order to make sure that you remember to do it on a consistent basis, even when life is happening. You also want to make sure that you're finding a consistent place that's quiet, comfortable, ideally away from distractions. Sometimes that's easier said than done. I taught my oldest to read while my youngest was a newborn, so the struggle is real. Just do what you can. And then the other thing that I always like to recommend here is to try to structure your routine so that reading is the reward. So my kids are doing this right now, and this was one of my favorite things that my parents did when I was a kid that we have repeated with my kids. I know there's like, it's interesting with parents, right? Because there's things that your parents do that you're like, oh, they were geniuses. And there's other things that your parents do that you're like, oh, what were they thinking? But this is a genius moment. So here's what my parents did and what we do with our kids. Bedtime is at 8, but if our kids would like to, they can stay up for 30 extra minutes and read. Did you see how I structured that? So really bedtime's at 8:30, right? Because that's when we're coming in there and turning off the light and sending the kids to bed. But if they want to be in bed, ready to go at 8 with a book, then they get 30 extra minutes of staying up to be able to enjoy that book. So this is a way that we add a little bit of extra reading time into our kids' day on a daily basis, and we make reading into the reward. So it's not like, would you like to read or play a video game? You know, there's no other alternatives other than sleeping, which my kids will never pick. I don't know too many kids, I don't think, that would pick sleeping. My daughter might sometimes, actually. But no, for the most part, most kids wouldn't pick that, right? And so you're structuring this choice in a way that the reading is the reward. And you just back up the bedtime a half hour, and there you go. So reading time at night. And making reading the reward is really helpful in terms of creating those routines and creating those places where reading is going to happen for our kids. Okay, so here is our STAIR method, and this is what we've been talking about. We talked about how important it is to start with yourself first and to really invest in yourself as your child's teacher. And we talked about how the more that you understand the process of learning to read, the easier it's going to be for your child, the more confidence that you will have, and by extension that they will have about the process of learning to read, and the better that they'll do. We talked about how the process of reading actually works, and we talked about combining that ability, that decoding skill, and being able to read the words with reading together with your child, reading out loud to them, and helping them understand what's happening in the book with vocabulary and those kinds of things to be able to raise a child who has strong reading comprehension and can read well. And then we talked about those extra things that you can add on to really help your child be motivated to read so that they're not only learning to read, but also learning to love reading. We talked about incorporating their interests, taking that thing that they really love and making it a part of their reading lesson. And then we also talked about routines, and we talked about how we can structure our day so that we can be consistent with teaching our kids to read, and also that we can make reading the reward. So I hope that this was helpful to you. I have created an opportunity for anybody who is interested in going a little bit deeper in this process and continuing to invest in yourself as a teacher, and also in finding resources for your child to be able to do that. And so I want to share with you quickly about this right now. And then after I'm done doing that, I want to make sure that I answer questions. So if you have questions about anything that we talked about tonight, or anything about teaching your child to read or motivating them to want to do it, go ahead and type those in the chat. I'm also going to share about the Reading Better Together Club, because I'm so excited about this new resource that's available to not only equip you to be an amazing reading teacher for your child, but also to equip you with the resources and the support that you really need to be successful and to help your child not only learn to read, but also to love it. So here's what's included in the Reading Better Together Club and what you get when you join the club. The first thing is a step-by-step plan for teaching your child to read. And this is really important because it walks through one step at a time exactly what to work on next. This is for us because a lot of us as parents and even as grandparents learn to read at a time when we really weren't focused on the research as a country. And so it's really important for us to understand how this process works best and how it works in a research-based way to really be able to set our kids up for success. And that's what's happening in this reading plan. And it also comes with video tips for each step, so that even if you didn't learn how to read this way, it'll show you exactly what to do to help your child be able to learn. And also in the right order, because we talked about how starting with the sight words first can cause problems tonight. Then that was just one example, but there are lots of different things that need to occur in the right order, and that's what's happening inside of this plan. Inside the club, you also get access to print and go resources. There's a resource library in there of organized resources that is growing every month. So every month I'm including new resources in there that were created by me, a trained teacher, in this growing library. And I'm also taking requests for resources. So if there's something that you can't find or that you'd like to see for your child, those are the kinds of things that I'm adding month by month. There's also a Q&A library. This is one of my favorite parts. So if you are ever feeling stuck or you're not sure what to do with your child, this is like a Netflix of answers to go and watch when you get stuck. The goal of the Q&A library is to help you build confidence and save frustration for your child, because I want to get you the answer as soon as possible so that your child is not getting in those ruts of getting stuck and getting frustrated, but instead you're just able to fix the problem and move on. So there are a whole bunch of the most common questions in there already in video form. So you can just find the question and hit play and watch it. And we're also adding to this monthly as well. So there's a monthly Q&A call where you can go and ask your question and get it answered live if it's not in there, or if you just want to hear more about that question. And then all of the replays from those calls get added to the library. So over time, this is growing each month as we add more questions in there. One of our members just said, my child is struggling with blending. She gets to the end of the word and comes up with a word that starts with the last letter of that word. So she would read like C-A-T, at, and then say something like turtle. I did go in and watch the video on this. It's very helpful, and I will add that into our lessons. I'm so glad I have gotten this program and get the help and insight I need to help my child to read. So that's exactly what the library is designed for, so that if there's something happening, you can go in there and get the help and the support that you need to figure out what to do about it. There's also live classes happening in the club every month. You can watch these live and ask questions, or there is a library of replays again, so you can go in and watch the replays on demand as you need them. And the topics for these live classes come directly from requests from the members. So the two most recent ones that we've done, we just did one yesterday all about assessment. So we talked all about how to know what your child knows, how to know what to do next, how to find your child's reading level and what to do about that, and then what to do, how to know if there's something that you need to be concerned about, or whether it's just something that your child is going to learn. So those were the kinds of things that we talked about in that assessment class. And then we also did one recently talking about dyslexia and some of the signs of dyslexia to be aware of, and some like what to do if you think your child has dyslexia. And those were both topics that were requested by our members. So we take requests and then we do classes. We also do guest workshops. So on some of these topics, I'll bring in a guest expert to be able to help, especially in areas where I don't have as much personal experience. So for example, next week, we're going to be bringing in a speech language pathologist. She is amazing. I'm so excited to get to spend some time with her in the group. And we're going to be talking all about speech and reading. So talking about speech difficulties and challenges, and how to know what they'll outgrow and when they might need more help, and how all of those things impact reading as well. All of this is taking place inside of a private community where you can connect with other parents. I love the fact that this is on a private app. So none of this is on Facebook or social media or anything. It all is happening inside this private app where you can go, and we don't have to worry about any of the security concerns that happen on social media. And we also don't have to scroll around through like our cousin's dinner from last night and all the ads and stuff to be able to find what we're looking for. So the members that are in there already have said that they're enjoying it. This person said very helpful, love the new platform, just because everything's organized and you can find what you need, and you're not having to dig through Facebook and hope it notifies you about stuff. So Charlotte said, I so appreciate the support and all the extra videos and things you have put into this. I finally feel hopeful and like I have a friend helping me through this process of teaching my kids to read. And I also have a special bonus coming for you because we are opening the club to new members this week and next week. And this is a special holiday reading bonus. This is sort of an early Black Friday present. This is going to be happening now, and then we're going to not be doing anything like different or special or anything for Black Friday, just because I know it gets so busy over Thanksgiving, and like I miss stuff that I would have wanted to know. So we're doing it now. So here's the Black Friday deal. Here it is. And there are 3 extra bonuses that everybody is going to get who joins the club before November the 17th, which is a week from Friday. The first one is the Homeschool Christmas Success Kit. So this is 4 resources that you can use in the month of December so that you can spend less time lesson planning and more time just enjoying the season with your kids and making memories. These are print and go resources and lessons and activities to use during that month to be able to teach Christmas around the world, math, science, and then there's also an advent calendar in there with Legos. And then you're also getting the Learning Letters Better Together mini course, which is my exact strategy for teaching letter names and letter sounds. So if you have one of those kids who's either struggling with letter names and letter sounds, or they're stuck at that point and can't make them into words, we're going to build a really strong foundation with those skills. And this is the strategy that I used with both of my kids, and it does not require your kid to have to sit at a desk. And then finally, we have the holiday reading activities bundle. And this is a library of resources for holidays all year round. So there's some fall stuff in there for like Thanksgiving and fall. And then there's winter Christmas stuff in there. And there's spring and summer. So when it's time for one of these major holidays, you can just go in there and print out the resource, and you don't have to spend a whole bunch of time on Pinterest trying to find stuff or trying to figure out if it's going to be something that's good for your child. So all of that stuff is included inside of the Reading Better Together Club. The membership for the club is $7 a month. I'm not sure how long I'm going to keep that price. Right now it's $7 a month. Everybody is kind of telling me that I'm crazy, that there's way too much stuff in there and it should be more than $7. They're probably right. It's going to be $7 a month through at least November 17th, which is a week from Friday. And then I'm not sure what I'll do after that. But everybody who joins it now is going to lock in that price. So as long as you're a member, it'll be $7 a month for you, even if it goes up later for people that are joining new. So here's all the things that are in there. You get the step-by-step plan to teach your child how to read, which is a $39 value. The growing Q&A library with the Netflix of videos, a $39 value. Everything's in the private community, a $29 value. You get live classes about teaching reading, a $27 value. Guest workshops, a $27 value for a total value of $178. Plus, when you join by next Friday, you get the Homeschool Christmas Success Kit. Those are the Christmas resources, a $56 value. Learning Letters Better Together, a $27 value. And the Holiday Reading Activities Bundle, a $27 value. Candy says, link to sign up. Yeah, let me grab that. That would be helpful, huh? Right here. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to put that link in the chat. Go ahead and grab that if you're interested. When you click on that link, it's going to take you over to the page where you can read more about the club if you're interested. But what's over there is pretty much what we've already talked about. But if you want to read more, it's there. And so you'll just click on any of the green buttons on that page that say, yes, I want this, and it'll jump you down to the bottom. And when you get there, it'll have you type in your name and your information. And then when you click submit, it will take you to the place where you can access all of those bonuses first, because that's just how it had to happen. And then it will also take you to the information about how to get into the app for the club and how to download that and how to get started in the club as well. So all of that will be organized for you as soon as you get over there. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go see what questions we have and answer those. And while I'm doing that, I would love it if you want to click on that link and go jump in the club if you're interested. Let's see here. My child is learning the strategies to read the words, not sight words, and still guesses or forgets both words and the strategies. She's 9. Okay. Ooh, this is a great question. Can you tell me a little bit more? What specific strategies are you learning and how are you doing that? Tell me a little bit more about that. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. Okay. So some kind of general thoughts while you're typing. First of all, learning the words and the strategies is going to take more repetition for some kids than others. So when your kids are learning to read, they say that there's sort of a continuum that exists. And there's about 10% of kids where if they kind of sort of get something from somebody at some point, they're going to learn how to read. Those are the kids where like your annoying neighbor will be like, oh, my kid just taught themselves how to read, and you're like, how did they do that? How is that possible? Those are those kids. And then there's a bunch of kids in the middle that will be able to learn how to read. And the more that you can be sequential and systematic about it, the easier it'll be for them. And then there's some kids that are really going to need a lot of repetition. And depending on where your child falls on that continuum, it's going to take a little bit longer or a little bit shorter to teach these strategies. So possibly one thing that could be happening is that maybe your daughter is going to need a little bit more support and a little bit more systematic kind of working through the process. I would be curious to know what you're doing to teach the strategies and the words as well. Be curious about that. Grammar rules. AI sounds like the long A. E at the end does not sound. E at the end makes G soft. Ooh, that's awesome. That's great. That is not at all what I was thinking you were going to say. So I love that. Okay. So first of all, these are some pretty advanced grammar rules, which is awesome that you're at this point. E at the end makes G soft. Yeah, for sure. These are definitely advanced, which is great. So first of all, I think it's important to focus on what's good, right? Because if you're at the point where you're talking about the fact that AI sounds like long A and E at the end makes G soft, then that means that your daughter is doing a lot of things well, right? They learn the letter sounds, they've learned blending, they're on the right track. And then when we're working on these rules, that's the part that we're at now. So for each of these, I think I would E at the end. Okay. Yeah. For each of these, I think I would split them up. See, this is hard because I don't know exactly what you're doing. One thing that can really help though is to split them up a little bit. So if you're working on all of these, that's going to be tricky, but I would take some time and just so for example, E at the end does not sound. I would spend quite a while working on words that have silent E at the end. And maybe you might do like a week or 2 weeks of all the words where it's silent E with long A. And then maybe another week of all the words where it's silent E with long O. And then maybe another week of it's all the words with silent E with long U. And then maybe you might start to mix them up in the next week. Now we have silent E, but we have all of these vowels together. And you continue to go at it without AI words and without soft G words and just focusing on just that one skill. And then also you want to include as much hands-on activities and hands-on practice as you can. So for that silent E at the end, you could make the magic wand. The magic E wand, we had ours. It was over there. It's not over there anymore. So this was something that I did with my daughter. So we took the pencil and we put like a shiny, sparkly star at the end that had an E. And so we spent a long time taking words like bat, B-A-T. And then we put, that wouldn't work, would it? Taking words that you could add an E at the end and make a different word. And so we'd spend a long time working on that and working on how that E would change the vowel sound of the word by adding the E. And so we'd write the word and then she'd put the E at the end, she'd read the word and then she'd put the E at the end and read the word again. We did a lot of that. We also did a lot of word building, and that might be another thing that you could try if you aren't doing that already. So using letter tiles or magnetic letters or any of those things, and actually working on building these words with the letter tiles. So you're not only working on reading, but you're also working on the spelling as well. There's a lot of research that shows that it goes both ways. And so as our kids learn to read, they'll become better spellers. And as our kids learn to spell, they'll become better readers. And so you could try attacking it from that side of things. A lot of times, the more that you can include the activities and get kids thinking with all their different learning styles, that can really help with retention and memorizing things. Let me know what you think. Is any of this sticking? It's hard. I wish that I could be like a fly on the wall when you're doing this sometime. And maybe that's something we need to do in the club, is like have people put their reading lesson and then we talk about it. I don't know. But yeah, it's tough without being there to actually see what's happening, you know, just to have to kind of guess and spitball. Yeah, more hands-on. Okay, awesome. Yeah. Yeah, help me think of more things to include. Oh, awesome. Good. Yeah. Good. Okay. Are there other questions about teaching kids to read? Go ahead and put those in the chat if you have them. I am going to put the link to the club as well. Let's see. Whoops, that's not the right one. I'm going to put the link to the club in there as well so that you can see it. And I'm going to scroll up and make sure that I got all the questions. Okay, I think I did. If you have a question and I missed it, can you put that in the chat again? Candy says, thank you, glad to sign up. Yay, I'm excited, Candy. I can't wait to get to know you a little bit better inside the club. That's going to be awesome. All right. I'm not seeing other questions, so we'll take just another minute and then we will end. Just as a quick reminder, all of those bonuses that are specifically for Black Friday or for, I don't know what we're calling it, Black week of November, I don't know, are ending on November 17th. So if you're interested in those, that's the Homeschool Christmas Success Kit, the lesson plans and done for you things for December, Learning Letters Better Together, which is the alphabet resource, and then also the holiday reading activities bundle. Those three things are going away on November 17th. But all of these things are all resources that you get inside the club for just $7 a month. You get that step-by-step plan for how to teach your child, the Q&A library, the community app, all of the print and go resources, live classes, both from me and our guests. It's an amazing, amazing club. I'm really excited to be able to be in there and to spend time helping you teach your child to read. And I would love to do that for you as well. You're welcome. I'm glad it was helpful, Sherry. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I hope that this was helpful for you and that you learned a lot about teaching your child to read. I thank you for being here tonight and for taking the time to invest in yourself as your child's teacher. That is so important when we're teaching our kids to read. It's important to take the time to invest in ourselves and to make sure that we have the skills and the strategy that we need to really help our kids be successful. So thank you for doing that tonight. Thank you for taking the time to learn more about the process of learning to read. And if you have any questions or there's anything that I can do, please feel free to reach out. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Bye.